Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning. First of all, sorry for the delay in the start. We were in a meeting outside, and today we have the pleasure to have here with us Professor Jamerson Rodrigues. Um, Jamerson did his bachelor in physics at the Federal University of Campina Grande, his master's and PhD at the Federal University of Paraíba. Then he was a postdoc junior for with a fellowship of CNPq here at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte. He was also a temporary professor at the Federal University of Grande Dourados during the pandemic time. And then he was a postdoc at the National Observatory in Rio de Janeiro with fellowships from the Institutional Training Program of the National Observatory and also a fellowship, a senior fellowship of FAPERJ. And since February,
Mark.
March, he's a professor here at the physics department. His research interests rely on particle physics and field theories, mainly on physics beyond the standard model and cosmology and neutrino physics. Today, he's going to talk about us about his research. Thank you, Jameson, for accepting our invitation, and feel free to start.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here. Uh, and second, I have to say, I must admit that English is not my favorite language. So if anything is not clear, feel free to interrupt at any time, and I'll try to explain it in another way, right? As Simonette said, there's a lot of interest, interesting. So I will try to be the more brief that I can. So I work in the interface between cosmology and particle physics. That's the subject that we will manage in the next hour. This is a brief summary. We'll talk a little about the cosmological surveys, the precision of this data. We'll pass through some topics of Bayesian inference, and then we'll go through some topics of interest in my research, that is the physics of primordial inflation, neutrino physics, the characteristics of dark matter and dark energy. First, I would like to highlight the increasing of the technology of the experiments of the cosmological surveys, and how it permit the advent of what we call precision cosmology. Nowadays, we have this lot of data and are really precise data that we can deal with to constrain our models, right? Our model of the cosmological universe, the cosmological models, and I hope I can make it clear that you can use it to constrain fundamental physics too. The benchmark for the CMB observation, we can say that is the Planck satellite, the Planck collaboration. I think the last release of the Planck collaboration came to public in 2018. It was the fourth release, and it paints this clear picture of the evolution of the cosmos. Right, so we have this information about the perturbation of temperature of the CMB, the cosmic microwave background, and the polarization and isotropy in this radiation. And you can use this to constrain our cosmological models. But also, I can tell you about the galaxy surveys. For example, the SDSS, the slow one, the DES, and more recently the DESI that came with new data just in the couple of years ago, that changed our understanding about the evolution of the cosmos, include the late time evolution. For example, the DESI suggests the existence of a dynamical dark energy, right? So we have this increasing volume of data, and with increasing precision, and we can take from this increasing volume of data a picture of the evolution of the universe. And the question we asked some while ago during my PhD was if we can use this data, the same data, to constrain fundamental models, fundamental physics. And with fundamental physics, I have to say, the quantum field theory that supports a particle physics model, right? So the interactions and the masses of particles through this kind of data. If we can constrain these parameters through this kind with this kind of data. And in order to do this, we have two main challenges. One is statistical because of the amount of data we have to deal with, and the other one is theoretical because we must address uh, what influence this kind of fundamental physics has on the evolution of the cosmos, on the evolution of the structures of the cosmos, in order to constrain this kind of models with cosmological data. So we have this. I will talk about these two challenges, let's say. Uh, and the first one that we will cover is the statistical challenge. The main tool to deal with this data is the Bayesian inference. Bayesian inference is a tool to answer one question: What is oh sorry? What is the probability of a range of the parameters of a model to be the true one to describe the system that I'm seeing? I mean, what is the probability of this range of parameter is the true one given the data, given the data. And this is given to us by by the Bayes theorem that basically associate this we call posterior probability. And this posterior probability is given by the likelihood, that is the probability of a given set of data, uh, be measured for a set of parameters, plus the prior probability, that is something that we know a priori, that we know before by the theory. Okay? And this conjunction here give us this density probability, that is the posterior probability. We can only assess this statistically because the universe is not deterministic. Uh, the universe is a probability function. I mean here that we know a system through a error bar of an experiment. So inside this, we can only see truth inside this error bar. We cannot assess it deterministic. We can all assess it through a probability statistically. So this function is what tells us about this. Sorry, about this probability. And also, we cannot compute this density function analytically, because as you may suppose, these relations here that give us the likelihood are not trivial. But we can obtain this probability, this posterior probability, by simple methods. The main ones being collectively called Monte Carlo Markov chain methods. I never know if it's Monte Carlo Markov chain or if it is Markov chain Monte Carlo. So we use the acronym MCMC to simplify things. Uh, Maybe the main algorithm is the Metropolis Hastings algorithm, but we have many algorithms to perform this sample analysis. And what it does, it basically creates a random process, a random walking in the parameter space of your model, This random walking is biased in order to reproduce this density probability. So with this random walk, we can construct our histograms, and with our histograms, these histograms, we can uh, fix set the confidence regions for your parameters. That says with certain certainty that that the true value for your parameters are inside these ranges, right? So this is how we construct this. We constrain the parameters of a model and make this nice triangular plot that shows this density, the posterior probability density. And this is not, as I said, this is not done analytically. We have a number of numerical tools to perform this analysis. I present to you two here. There is the class code and the MultiPython. The MultiPython is a sampler. This means that it generates the samples. The samples in the parameter space that here is depicted by this vector here, A. And it gives the sample, the values of the parameters to the class code. The class code is a Boltzmann solver. It solves the cosmological perturbation equations. So it get the values of the parameters and computes the predictions of a cosmological model for these quantities here that is pictured as y and x. This can be y, can be, let's say, the variance of matter perturbation. We call it the Matter-Poisson spectrum in relation to the scales. So give us this relation between the Matter-Poisson spectrum and the scales that we see the structures in the universe. And then it returns, the class code returns this prediction of the models given a set of parameters to the MultiPython code. The MultiPython code then computes the likelihood. This means compares the prediction with the data points that it measure, and then computes the posterior probability, and then chooses if this point describes well the data, is a good fit for the data, and then build uh, this constraint, these contour regions for the parameter space of a model. And with this is the basic steps that we can constrain our cosmological model. Here we have the lambda CDM, that is the standard cosmological model. I analyzed the lambda CDM here and obtained this constraint for the CMB data from Planck. So as you can see, we have these 6 parameters that describe the lambda CDM with uh, really surprising precision. Not surprise, but with a really good precision, right? So we can address the evolution of the cosmos just with these 6 parameters. This is surprising. Only 6 parameters to describe the evolution of something really complicated as the whole cosmos. But there is a thing. Okay, we can constrain the cosmological model with this analysis. But what can the cosmological model tell us about the fundamental interactions of the particles that constitute the cosmos? Because here, okay, we constrain the abundance of the baryons, we constrain the density of the baryons of the universe, the density of the cold dark matter, and also the density of dark energy. But it doesn't tell us information about the mass of the particle that constitutes the cold dark matter component, the interactions of of these particles, in neither about the thing that constitutes dark energy. And this brings us to the second challenge of this kind of research that tries to associate particle physics with cosmology. That is, how can we set, how can we describe the relation, the effects of this kind of model of the fundamental physics that is described by a extension of the standard model of particle physics with the evolution of the cosmos. Because if we can set this relation, we can use the same data that constrain the cosmological model to constrain the particle physics model, and also to constrain the of course the interactions of particles, to constrain the mass terms of particles and so on. So in my research, I through the years, I become to explore. I started to explore different aspects of the evolution of the cosmos related to particle physics, and we focus in four topics. That are the main interests of my research. That is beginning with inflation and pass through neutrino physics, and then dark matter, the characteristic of dark matter, dark energy. These things are somewhat connected, or can be somewhat connected. So we can constrain these things simultaneously. Starting with inflation. Uh, the primordial inflation was suggested in the beginning of the 80s in order to solve some problems that the standard of the evolution of the cosmos presents. What are these problems? Uh, One of them is called horizon problem. The horizon problem basically arises for the fact that we see one side of the universe really, really far away from us and measure its temperature, we will see that the temperature is really similar for what we measure in the other side of the universe, on the light coming from the other side of the universe. And this is really strange because, in principle, these patches of the universe are out of the particle horizon of each other. If we assume a standard evolution of the cosmos, I mean, evolution of the cosmos constituted mainly first by radiation, and then as it expands by matter, and then by dark energy. But if we assume a epoch in the beginning of the cosmos of an accelerated expansion, this is what we call primordial inflation. This problem is solved because we have another contribution to the particle horizon of the universe, to the to the patches of the universe that are in causal contact or were in causal contact some while ago in the universe, in the cosmos. So it was suggest this accelerated expansion in the beginning of the cosmos, pretty much similar to what we obtain today with the dark energy, with a cosmological constant. But it could not be ruled by a cosmological constant because we know that primordial inflation has an end. And then the standard evolution of the cosmos began. So it was suggested that a field called the inflaton ruled the initial expansion of the cosmos. And this was possible if the inflaton has a scalar potential that is flat somewhere in its field range, because the inflaton in this region uh, rolls slowly. That is called slow roll mechanism. If it rolls slowly, its energy changes little with time, so it mimics a cosmological constant, and then we have expansion of the scale factor that is nearly exponential, and then it rolls down the scalar energy, the potential energy. In some point of this potential energy, it's not a slow roll anymore, so inflation ends, and then he hits the universe with dumped oscillations in around its minimum. This is called cold cold inflation scenario. Uh, there is a warm inflation scenario. We'll talk a little about this later, but this is the canonical inflationary scenario. Okay, so this is the background physics of inflation. Uh, s- this tell us about the evolution of the cosmos at the beginning. But it was suggested that The inflaton is a scalar field that, in principle, can be susceptible to quantum fluctuations. So maybe there was patches in the universe that has a perturbation that makes the density of the inflaton a little higher or a little lower. This means that the background of the inflaton was dislocated a little to the left, a little to the right, and it caused a delay of the end of inflation, uh, patches to patches in the universe. This delay, so one part of the universe expands more, other parts expand a little less, and this creates a perturbation in curvature of the universe. This perturbations of curvature through the cosmological model, the Einstein gravity, the general relativity, is associated to perturbation in the tensor energy moment. This thing we can measure. We observe, can measure it observationally. I think it's uh, okay, but we can observe this kind of things. So we can use, this is the process that we can use cosmological data to constrain the interactions of the inflaton of this field. This is done through the Mukhanov potential. The Mukhanov potential uh, is this U there. This U is given relation to the perturbation of curvature. There is a minus sign here. And in the beginning of the universe, this potential U is equal to the perturbation of the inflaton field. So we can use this as control condition. We can use inflation as control condition to this U, solve this equation here, and then by solving this equation, we have a prediction of the perturbation of the universe that we can compare with data. And this prediction is proportional. I don't know why I am pointing. This prediction is proportional to the scalar potential of the inflaton. So we can use data to constrain the scalar potential of the inflaton. But the scalar potential of the inflaton has information to all the parameters of the inflaton, the mass of the inflaton, the interactions of the inflaton, uh, with itself, even with other particles through the loop analysis, the perturbative analysis of the quantum theory. So that's how we can constrain this fundamental property of this field, the inflaton field. And that's what we have done. We perform this kind of analysis in the Higgs inflation scenario, which assumes the Higgs field, the standard Higgs field, as the inflaton. This is possible by assuming a non-minimal coupling, what we call non-minimal coupling of the Higgs with the gravity, with the rich field, right? This is non-minimal coupling has this form here that is uh, in principle renormalizable. Of course, it's non-renormalizable because we are talking about gravity, but it's perturbative, and this is the standard potential energy of the Higgs field. So by doing this, what we obtain is super damped. I don't know if this is the right translation. A super damped oscillation of the Higgs field in the beginning of the universe. This super damping, this amortization of the oscillation works like a slow roll mechanism. So the energy of the field varies slowly, and we obtain the right conditions for inflation. So uh, we can uh, we can implement this in the class code, and not exactly this. We introduce this potential with one loop corrections. The one loop corrections are given in respect to the interactions of the Higgs field with other particles. And when we implement this in the class code, the Boltzmann solver, we can constrain the interactions of the Higgs. This parameter here, A prime is given in relation to the beta function of the quartic coupling of the Higgs, and this contains the interactions of the Higgs field. So we can constrain these couplings of the Higgs fields, and we perform this analysis. These couplings, as the inflation is a physical process of high energies, these constraints are related to the high energy physics, and we can perform the what we call renormalization group analysis and associate this constraint at the scale of 10 to the 13 GeVs to the scale of electroweak physics, that is 10 to the second GeVs, giga electrovolts. And we perform this analysis through the top quark mass. This first result here that we obtain is the constraint that we obtain to the top quark mass with cosmological data. If we assume the Higgs field as the inflaton, this is the superior limit that we must obtain to the top quark mass, right? We obtain this with CMB data that comes from Planck and with supernovae data that comes from the Pantheon Plus catalog. So cosmological data used to constrain fundamental physics. But if you compare this constraint here with the one obtained with the data from the collider, this is the second line here. This constraint for the top quark mass is obtained with the data from Tevatron and LEP. And we compare these two results, the cosmological one and the one from particle physics. We will see that they are almost 8 sigma away. There is a tension between the cosmological result and the result from particle physics. This tension, okay,
Top mass enters the parameters of
the top mass enters the parameters because we have the inflationary potential is the Coleman potential. So we have a mass term here and the Higgs to the square. We have the quartic coupling with Higgs to the fourth order. And we have the beta function with that we have to multiply for the logarithm of the inflaton field, the Higgs. I have not enough space. Plus the Higgs to the fourth. This beta function, sorry, this beta function has a term, has many terms. One of the terms is proportional to the quartic coupling to square. Another terms is proportional to the Yukawa coupling, to the fourth order. One of these Yukawa couplings are the Yukawa coupling of the quark top. And the mass of the quark top is equal to the Yukawa coupling of the quark top times multiplied by the VEV of the Higgs. This thing here we know that is 176 GeV. This thing is here, we can constrain it by the collider data, or in this case, by constraining the A prime parameter with cosmological data. That is the analysis that we have performed. So if we constrain this thing here, I cannot point it beta, we can constrain this thing here. Right? With some assumption, a lot of assumptions, but yes, we can constrain. And that's how we constrain the kind of things. If you constrain the scalar potential of the inflaton, we can constrain its coupling. Okay, so the Higgs field is not able to describe the inflationary dynamics. If not the Higgs field, that is the only scalar that we measure, what? And maybe we could assume a new coupling with the Higgs field, with a bosonic field, with a new coupling of the Higgs field with a new bosonic field that changes this constraint from cosmology to become in accordance with the one obtained by Collider. So this could give us a hint of new couplings of the inflaton that could be compared with the results from Collider. So we can perform this kind of analysis. This is an idea for our future work. So this is the thing that we can do with inflation. Neutrinos. Okay.
You are considering the top quark because it's the most important part in the bit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The other terms are small, but
Yeah, because
maybe you could have another kind of particle that you still don't know. Is this the
are two things. The first one is that the as the top quark is close to one, the Yukawa coupling, it contributes a lot to the beta function. And the other things is that the Eero bars on the top quark coupling are the bigger ones in the electroweak scale. So we can variate it more, right? So are these two things that we consider the top quark that enables the top quark to do this analysis. Uh, okay, and neutrinos. What about neutrinos? Neutrinos is a topic interesting on its own. From the standard model of particle physics, we know that only left during the neutrinos interacts through the weak interaction. So it means that in the standard model of particle physics, neutrino doesn't have mass term. But we know by counting the number of neutrinos that comes from sun and atmosphere that neutrinos has mass because they oscillate. So there is no explanation for the mass of the neutrinos in the standard model of particle physics. This demands extensions of the standard model. The canonical extension of the standard model of particle physics that explain the neutrino mass is called collectively as the seesaw mechanism. What is the seesaw mechanism? The seesaw mechanism is basically introduce a new scale of high energies associated to the breaking of lepton number that explain the low energy scale of the neutrino, the active neutrino mass, the standard neutrinos. That's why it's called seesaw. One high energy to explain other low energy scale. And the question that we ask in our research is if this high energy that is demanded by the seesaw mechanism can be associated with the physics of the primordial universe. With the physics of primordial universe, I mean the physics of inflation. So in this analysis, we connected inflation and the type 1 seesaw mechanism, demand that the potential of the inflaton is a double L potential, a really simple potential. That is, if I go back here, we demanded that the potential energy of inflation is just a thing like this. Because this potential has a minimum, has a minimum in somewhere in the field region. If this minimum is large enough in the origin of the potential energy, will be will be flat. Will be flat. So has the conditions for inflation. And as it depends on the minimum, the flatness depends on the minimum, we can constrain the minimum of the field with cosmological data. So we associate the inflaton with the scale of neutrinos. So the inflaton is a measure that generate the scale of the neutrinos, the scale of break of lepton number, and we try to constrain this scale with cosmological data. And this is done with also the Planck data and some data from late time expansion. I think BAO and supernova catalogs. So as you see here, we can constrain with cosmological data the vacuum expectation value of the majoron and the inflaton that are the same things. Actually, major is pseudo-Goldstone boson, but is the partner of the majoron. And this gives us information about the mass of the right-handed neutrinos with cosmology. The sad thing here is that this scale is so high. The right-handed neutrinos, that is the new particles from the type 1 seesaw, are so high that is basically excluded to a dark sector. It has no signature, observational signature in the visible sector. So we cannot falsify this theory. The next question is if you can imagine different types of seesaw, maybe I invest one, with a flatter potential that may reduce this constraint for the mass of these new particles, and then we can have a signature in the colliders or so on. Okay, so this is analysis that we are going to perform. But the fact here is that yes, we can constrain given the scenario the VEV or the mass of these new particles. And also, the seesaw mechanism give us these new degrees of freedom. And if these new degrees of freedom are light enough, this can have an effect on the late time evolution of the cosmos. And we can constrain this effect, observing the evolution of the structure. We can constrain this to these new degrees, but we also can constrain the standard model neutrinos, the total mass of the standard model neutrinos. And this is analysis that we have performed to the standard neutrinos, and we are planning to perform this same kind of analysis to the right-handed neutrinos and other degrees of freedom, if in the model of the seesaw mechanism they are light enough. In this paper here, we perform a forecast of the sensitivity of this new galaxy survey that's called JPAS. JPAS is a collaboration between Brazil and Spain. I am part of this collaboration, and it's a cosmological survey. It counts the number of galaxies that are in the window of the telescope of the camera. And with the let's say properties of this instrument, we can uh, we can uh, uh, I don't know the word in English. How can I say stipular in English? We can stipulate the precision in the observable, that is the matter-Paul spectrum. And with the precision that we stipulate for this observable, we can stipulate the precision that this data, this future data, can have in the cosmological parameters. So we constrain here the model, the cosmological model lambda CDM plus the total neutrino mass, and we obtain this estimation, this estimative for the total neutrino mass, right? So see here that if we sum the medium value of this parameter with this superior error here, we will obtain roughly 0.06 EV. So it's a superior limit in 2 sigma for the this estimative. It's only estimative. So maybe we have a superior limit that is really close from cosmology. We will have a superior limit that is really close to the inferior limit that comes from an oscillation experiment. So what I'm saying is that from particle physics, we obtain the sum of the neutrino, the standard neutrinos, right? A superior limit that is an inferior limit, 0.06 eV. And from cosmology, we may obtain a superior limit that is 0.06 eV. So maybe it will begin getting tension in a near future. And we have to explain this tension by model building mainly. So it's a perspective for the future. Dark matter. How much do I have? It's a lot of time, so we can relax. Dark matter. We are always interested. Okay.
If you get in this contradictory situation, you could argue that there should be another kind of neutrino to make up the cosmological mass you are measuring, but you don't see oscillations.
Maybe I never thought about this. A new kind of neutrinos.
Like there are neutrino models.
Yeah, but
They should be
a sterile neutrino, if it is light enough, would affect these two.
yeah.
So would enter in this parameter. Would enter in these parameters. This parameter is about all the light degrees of freedoms that affect the late time expansion. We consider just 3 neutrinos here, but we could consider 4 neutrinos here with a sterile neutrino. Of course, in this kind of analysis, there is also the effective number of degrees of freedom. And this is constrained also. There is a rigid constraints on this also. This has to be somewhat around 3, both from particle physics and for the cosmological analysis. So we cannot have a sterile neutrino that is fully thermalized with plasma because it would get out of this constraint here. So things are a little complicated. In my opinion, if this happens, this means, because I'm pretty confident that this is true, because this is supported only by counting the number of neutrinos. It's almost model independent. But this is highly model dependent. So maybe if this occurs, it means that this model here is not so right. The lambda CDM, the standard cosmological model, is not the right one to describe the evolution of the late time expansion. So we have to assume another cosmological model with other constituents maybe, and see what are the characteristics of these new things. So dark matter, we also have interest in dark matter, mainly in the relation of dark matter with the beginning of the universe, with the inflationary dynamic. And also because in this kind of model of the seesaw mechanism, we have a lot of these new degrees of freedom that can be stable and can make the role of full dark matter of the universe. So we perform the analysis altogether of these kind of scenarios. In this model in particular, we analyze the production of dark matter through the freezing mechanism. That is the production of a dark matter component that never thermalizes with the thermal bath. So it never gets in thermal equilibrium with the thermal bath. And this production, this scenario, was constructed in a warm inflation scenario. What is warm inflation? I explained to you the cold inflation scenario. That inflation is through a flat regime in the potential energy of the inflaton. Warm inflation scenario is a different scenario where this slow roll is maintained by the dissipation of the inflaton. Inflaton is decaying the thermal bath of the universe, maintaining its temperature. That's why it's warm, because the temperature of the universe never goes below this limit. So it maintains it warm. And if we have a thermal bath, we can produce dark matter way before in comparison with the scenarios of freeze out mechanisms of generation of dark matter. So we can have, as this component of dark matter is produced a lot earlier, we can have higher abundance of dark matter in the universe. So we explore this mechanism, this relation with this model. It's a model inspired in a invest kind of seesaw. Here we have this phi here is the inflaton. This sigma is another scalar that is an auxiliary field. N is a right-hand neutrinos, and we have the particles of the standard model. And this chi here is the proposed component of dark matter. So we have the production of dark matter through this decay here. Zeta prime is a gauge boson related to a new gauge symmetry that is a abelian gauge symmetry. The phi field that is the inflaton break this gauge symmetry and gives this scale of energy here, enables this decay. The phi breaks the gauge symmetry, and this sigma field breaks a remnant symmetry that is a -1 to the L symmetry. When phi gets a VEV and sigma gets a VEV, we have the scalar dark mass scale. The fermionic dark mass has fermionic dark particle becomes massive, and the zeta prime becomes massive. So the case is enabled, and we have the constituent of the dark matter of the universe. And with this, we compute the yield of dark matter during the inflationary period that is around to 0 folds to the 60 fold. So we have the appropriate yield of dark matter with this mechanism. Another interesting thing is that we have a wide range for the mass of dark matter in this model that we can analyze. We can analyze in direct detection or indirect detection. Right? In this model of volume inflation, it's a little hard to analyze this because of the scales of the inflaton and the scale of the mass of the mediator. But I want to analyze these kind of things in the cold inflation scenario that has a lot of freedom to analyze direct, indirect detection. And the nice thing is that we obtain inflation, we obtain the mass, the component of dark matter, and the mass of the standard neutrino through the inverse Stall mechanism. So we can obtain all of this. And to finalize, I'm almost getting to the end. Most recently, have raised our attention has turned to the relation between dark energy neutrinos because of the latest results of DESI. And what is the relation between dark energy and neutrinos? Is because the parameters that describe cosmological dark energy are degenerated with the parameters that describe the standard neutrinos, the total mass of the neutrinos, because they affect the angular distance to the source that are observed in the same way. The reflect of this degeneracy is loosening on the bonds, cosmological bonds to this parameter. So this describe this loosening. Here we have the lambda CDM, where the equation of state of dark energy are fixed. So we have not these degrees of freedom in the analysis. And with this, we obtain this really strict, rigid bond constraint for the total neutrino mass. It's a superior limit that is around, this is with Planck data and with the DESI result. The superior limit here for these lines is about 0.07 electron volts. But if we assume a dynamical dark energy component, we lose this constraint here to about 0.13 electron volts. So we lose the constraint. This happens in this kind of dynamical energy models that we call phenomenological. The question is, this same thing happens, if the same thing happens in models of dynamical dark energy that connects the late time evolution of the cosmos with the primordial inflation. This kind of model is called quintessential inflation model. Because in principle, we break this degeneracy between the parameters of dark energy with parameters of neutrinos, because in this kind of models, the equation state of dark energy is constrained with data from early time universe, not only with the data from late time universe. So we can use data to break this degeneracy, and this was the result that we have obtained with real cosmological data. We obtain this superior limit here that is much more rigid than what is obtained for the CPL model here. This superior limit is about some neutrinos 0.13 eV, right? And this one is about 0.07. It's one of the most restrictive results for the neutrino mass in the literature, right? So this is with data, actual data. We can imagine in a near future with more precision data, this limit goes down, and then we have a problem, as I said, between the cosmological and the oscillation experiments. This, in my opinion, means that these kind of models are not suitable to explain the evolution of the cosmos. So it's a way to falsify this kind of theories. A way to falsify this kind of theories. That is an important thing in science in general. That's it, and some final remarks. I hope I could make it clear that cosmological observation are good tools for investigating scenarios beyond the standard model. We have a lot of data, a lot of information about the early and late time universe that may constrain these new degrees of freedom that are suggested in these extensions of the standard model of particle physics. There is a complementary aspect between the terrestrial experiments that are the colliders and then the experiments of oscillation of neutrinos with the experiments, the cosmological experiments. This complementary that we can compare the results from cosmology with the results from colliders, for example, brings some predictability to the models, right? We can falsify the models. We can compare the predictions and falsify the models. So it's really interesting for the science of the thing. And also that the increasing accuracy of the experiments, the decreased amount of data that we have, make a promising scenario. We have a lot of experiments, cosmological experiments are planned and are collecting data. We have the JPAS that are now collecting data. The first release is about to come. We have the Euclid satellite that is a cosmological galaxy survey that are also around the corner to release the first release of data. We have the Simons Observatory, that's a terrestrial satellite, terrestrial telescope that is measured CME. We have the Lightbird that also is I don't know if it's planned to be launched or if it's collecting data. I think it's planned to be launched. We have the UFRN participating in the ANDES collaboration that is a spectrograph that is planned to collect data in the next decade. So we have this lot of data that are planned, they are to come that we can use to do this kind of analysis, the constraints of model. So I think it's a promising scenario. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jameson, for your presentation. Now I open for questions.
Thank you, Professor Rodrigues, for the wonderful talk. So in the beginning of your talk, you were talking about the Markov chain Monte Carlo methods. Could you go through a little bit about the findings that you had on the parameters on that simulation. I think you used Planck data, right? Right in the beginning, the
Okay.
Markov chain, Monte Carlo, you presented some results. People can go through a little bit more in detail
This
the very beginning.
no. That's over. I'm sorry. Here, this result here is obtained for the Higgs inflation scenario. Uh, this specific result here is that we could break the positive correlation between the H naught parameter, that is the rate of expansion of the cosmos today, with this the sigma 8 parameters. That is sigma 8 is a parameter that measure the clustering of matter. And there is a problem that we call there is the problem of the tension of this the H naught, and another problem of the tension of the sigma 8. And because there are set of data that give different results to the same parameters, both to the sigma 8 to the H naught. And in this model, there is another problem. When we try to solve the H naught tension, we worse the sigma H tension. In this analysis of the Higgs inflation, we showed that for some range of the number of folds of inflation, we break this correlation between these two parameters. That means uh, for for uh, for the number of folds bigger than 55, we have that increasing H naught will decrease sigma E. That is the appropriate to solve both tensions together. It's not enough to solve because we have a pretty small range for the number of folds, so cannot really solve the H naught tension, but is maybe point away. This I don't put. I only put the image here to show that we can constrain the cosmological parameters with this analysis. All right, and to show that the sample methods that generate these Markov chains can be used to this. I don't know if it was specific to what you asked.
There was a wonderful explanation, but I mean there's a table with the parameters that you found. I think it is another slide.
Is not that is another slide?
I think so. Right, this one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could comment on the parameters that you found there in more detail. I couldn't see during the talk. Thank you.
Okay, in this analysis, I performed this analysis for the Lambda CDM with the Planck data. If I remember it well, it was just with Planck data. The latest, I think it is the Planck data from 2018, 2015. We performed just this analysis that we mentioned, and with this analysis, we obtained this constraint for the results. These results basically says, well, there is 68% probability that this result be in this range here, and 68% probability of this parameter here be in this range. That is the integrated probability of the parameters. I mean, the probability of the parameter be in this range for any kind of value to the other ones, right? So it's really the probability of only this parameter to be in this range. And it is we perform this analysis with Python and obtain this integrated posterior probability. I don't know if I answer again. Okay. I thank you.
More questions?
I have a question about the dark matter. So you mentioned that you analyze an annihilation between two dark matter particles, dark matter and anti-dark matter. And I don't know if I missed, but in that case, you are considering that dark matter is a Majorana or Dirac particle.
Dark matter in this case, I think it's a Majorana particle, but I do not analyze the annihilation of dark matter. I analyze the annihilation of particle in the thermal bath. There are particles of the standard model into dark matter particle. So I think the conclusion is because the set of time is inverted here. These are particles of the thermal bath that decays into particle of the dark matter, fermionic dark matter. The way this annihilation happens is from right to left, because it's not energetically favorable to happen on the other side, because the mass of dark matter in this kind of model must be lower than the temperature of the thermal bath. That dictates a dynamical mass term for this constituent here, right? So the only way this process can occur is from right to the left, and generates the dark matter components by what we call freezing. And as this is a inverse Sol mechanism, this fermionical particle here, that is the dark matter component, is Majorana. It has to be Majorana. So I don't know. Hey, that's it. I answered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
In the quintessential inflation model, yes. Inflation model. Yeah, in the potential, for example. Yeah. So how is this working? Like in that in this side you have inflation, high energy, then it the field
Rose, the field
okay.
rose, and then this time we have a runaway type of potential that is appropriate to generate the late time expansion.
Okay.
So
So you
in
have
this time we have the cosmological constant here.
But how is the reheating in this case?
Yeah, reheating is a problem in this kind of models.
Okay.
But now we have some mechanism of gravitational reheating. Gravitational reheating. That reheating occurs not on the minimum of the field, but through the decay of the field with graviton particles. We have this kind of mechanism that comes just from gravity. And
Okay.
it assures us a temperature of some, I think, 60 GeVs in the beginning of the universe. It's like electroweak scale already appear broken in the universe, and things like this. I'm not an expert on this, but this kind of mechanism of gravitational reheating is what saves this kind of mechanism.
And in this case, your dark energy equation state is like quintessence that is approaching -1.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Is approaching -1.
Now I have a question. Yeah. So in this case of gravitational reheating, the graviton would reheating into the standard model particles, or what?
I do
So
not
you have
understand.
you have inflaton,
Hmm?
and then the inflaton produces graviton, right?
Yes.
I mean, so these gravitons, they would produce standard model particles,
Yes.
and then the bath.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so would, by the way, the gravitons exist before the inflaton, or it comes later?
The graviton, I don't know much about the theories of quantum gravity, but graviton as a particle must exist only by a perturbation. This perturbation was induced by the inflaton, because the field, okay, the field is quantum field theory. The field exists, but to the field originates a particle, it must be perturbed. in some way. It must be perturbed. So the perturbation that perturbed the gravitational field was the inflaton. That's how inflaton generated the particles of the universe in these scenarios.
More questions? I'll have one. More a curiosity. Since you have a formation in particle physics and cosmology, why do we question only the constraints on the sum of mass through cosmology? And I don't know, I have the feeling that we are sure that from particle physics, collisions is this, we cannot change this.
This is a discussion similar to what we have with the constraint from the shoes for the H naught and the constraint from the Planck. Because the shoes says, okay, we are just using geometry. We are pretty sure that our data is right. We measure things in the right way. So if it's wrong, geometry is wrong. And geometry, we know that geometry is working pretty well from a lot of time. In case of the neutrino mass constraints, in one case, that is the particle physics, I'm just counting the number of particles, just counting. And I know how the sun generates neutrinos. I know the nuclear physics of the sun. So I know it pretty well. And I know that I count the number of neutrinos that comes. It's, it's harder that the number that I'm counting is not the real number, that I'm counting something wrong. In my opinion, it's much more easier that a model that I have that explain the evolution of the whole cosmos is not the right one. And this conclusion become stronger if we see the tensions that we are having in the cosmological analysis. But I don't know. Maybe the people of the collaboration of the oscillation neutrinos did something wrong. I cannot say.
Yeah, but I agree that we have lots of reason to doubt on
Yes.
lambda CDM.
Yes.
yeah.
We may be wrong.
Okay, so I think we can thank Jameson again.
Thank you very much.